Okay, folks, if you would take your seats here, we're now going to begin what is one of two distinguished external guests we're fortunate enough to have joining our CU Horse community from different corners of horse country around the world. Our next speaker here has journeyed to visit us from his home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He's a distinguished author and a journalist. You might have read some of his pieces. If you're horse-oriented, you might have read some of his pieces in venues like the Wall Street Journal, Outside, Bloomberg. He's also been in the midst of kind of a whirlwind book tour for his really fascinating book, which will be featured later today at a book signing here, The Last Ride of the Pony Express. And actually was fortunate enough to meet with Will as he was doing his research. You know, this is an incredible piece of work here that is combining Will's gift as an accomplished horseman and an experiential student of the past. He also, you know, wrote up some of the best thinking on the global history of, you know, horse-based postal relay, and then he went and rode across the country in the path of the Pony Express itself, and as part of his journey to understand that. He also happens to be a really active member of some very interesting and exciting, you know, horse equestrian sport here. He has represented the United States at the World Nomad Games, was just there in September in Kazakhstan on the other side of the world, and in the process, right, has become a student of global horse culture, you know, active and exciting traditions that are happening around the world. So we're fortunate, really fortunate to have him here with us today to share, you know, aspects of his own experience and his own story. And I want you to please give him a warm welcome here to our forum today as our main seminar.
Thank you, Will. Thank you all for being here. It's my pleasure to get up and talk to you about horsemanship in Central Asia. And a quick word about how I came to this is that I had an idea, I still have it, that I want to write a book about horse trafficking outside of Central Asia, from Central Asia, and the Silk Roads. And in Santa Fe, New Mexico, my home, we have an international folk art market that brings artists from all over the world. In 2018, I went to the market to contact people from Central Asia, and I ended up talking to a group of Kyrgyz women from Kyrgyzstan selling scarves, and they had a woman from Wyoming there who said, "We are sending a team of US cowboys to the World Nomad Games to play a game on horses." And she said, "Do you want to be a part of it?" And I said, "That sounds like a lot of fun, because I like to do fun things with horses." And this is the game I signed up to play. This game is called Kok Boru in Kyrgyz, in the Kyrgyz language. And it involves picking up a dead goat from the back of a horse and throwing it in the other team's goal. And the way this works, it's a field that's about 300 yards long, and two teams go at it. There's 4 horsemen from each team on the field at a time. And they fight over the goat. And the goat has to weigh at least 73 pounds. So it's heavy. Here you can see a rider from Kyrgyzstan carrying the goat. And the horses run. It's a fast game. This is throwing the goat into the opposing team's goal. This is the green plastic basin is the goal, and it's called a Thai Kazan in Kyrgyz, and that's the same word for like a large wok. It means a basin. And here you see the goat about to go in the Thai Kazan. And I'll just tell you, with the goat, they kill the goat immediately before the game. They give it the blessing, they cut its head off, and then they weigh it, because it has to be heavy. It has to be a difficult game. It's an old game. and it's a highly physical game. And sometimes throwing the goat into the taikazan, the rider goes with the goat. So if this goat weighs 80 pounds and you're throwing it into the goal, a lot of times it's easier to just simply let your body go with the momentum. And so it's kind of a young man's game, but it's an exciting game to play, an exciting game to watch. The games last an hour. So there's 3 20-minute periods. And it really takes a special kind of horse to play this game. And there are lots of horses in Kyrgyzstan. And this is what the game looks like in the countryside. It's considered the national game of Kyrgyzstan, which is now incidentally known as the Kyrgyz Republic, but they still refer to it as Kyrgyzstan, and so do we. So this is a photo taken in the western part of Kyrgyzstan of a man about to reach down and pick up the goat. This is another photo from the countryside. So the game is widely played in all over Central Asia, and when it's played in rural, this, for reference, is the World Nomad Games. So the World Nomad Games is the largest ethno-sport competition in the world, and it's certainly the largest stage for these games. In the countryside, it looks a lot different. And you can see the taikazan on the left there, and it's sort of an adobe structure with tractor tires there to pad the horses when they run into the goal. And as you can see, they fight over the goat. You try to pull it from the other team's grasp. You use your horse in ways that people in the Western world do not use their horses. Like I said, it's played all over Central Asia. This is a photograph from Afghanistan, where they call it buskashi. And you can tell these are Afghan riders by the equipment on the horse and by the garb, the clothing. That's the Afghan flag on the man's near shoulder there. This game has been featured, the Afghan version, in a film called The Horseman, which came out in the 80s, and also in like the second Rambo. If anybody's seen that, I think it shows up. But it draws huge crowds, draws large amounts of betting. It's very exciting to watch. This is the Afghan version. This is the Kazakh version, played in Kazakhstan. This is a fake goat. This goat is made out of rubber, very heavy goat. And I took this photo at the World Nomad Games this past year, and they said that they were using a fake goat, a dummy goat, as a nod to Greenpeace representatives at the games. I'll say that after every game, the winning team eats the goat. It's a dish called kurdak, and it's an honor. And we've eaten the goat after the game, and everybody always asks, well, it must be tenderized. And it's hard to say because it's a whole goat, so not every bit is tenderized. But you can certainly see broken bones in the goat. And they cut it up and they fry it in a wok with onions and carrots, and it's certainly a specialty of Central Asia. This is a version of the game called Alaman Ulak. And in Alaman, there can be up to 5,000 mounted riders fighting over a single goat. It's as close to horseback warfare as basically anything you're going to find on the planet today. It's only played in the winter because the horses can overheat. So they have to play it at a time when it's cold. And that's the steam coming off the horses. So when you watch these games, you can hardly see what's going on in the center of this scrum for all of the steam coming off the horses. To me, this looks like one of the most dangerous environments to be horseback of anything I can imagine. They play it on the steppe, where there are no fences, where the field can be, it's not really delineated, but it can be 1 to 2 miles wide. The spectators all park SUVs on the surrounding hills. They set up camp and they watch these games which can last all day. For all of the daylight hours, these men will fight over the goat. It's quite a spectacle, and it really challenges a lot of Western perception of how we ride horses, how we think about horses, and if you want to know what mounted combat looks like, this is a pretty good idea of it. This is the logo for the Kyrgyz Kokboru Federation, and the man on the horse is holding a wolf. The history of the game is that nomads in Central Asia with herds of sheep and goats had to protect their livestock. They had no firearms, but they had swift horses. So they would run the wolf down, cut its head off, and play keep away with the goat back to camp, so that whoever arrived at camp with the goat won. This has been a long-standing game in Central Asia. You know, we were told that the game's 3,000 years old. I don't think that's true, and I'll show you why, but it is an old game. And it's evolved significantly over the years, but it's, excuse me, it's been a long-standing test of horsemanship, a way for a training exercise for the mounted cavalries of the steppe, in a way that nomadic communities chose their leaders. And one thing that makes this ancient is that in the middle 1800s, there developed an idea of horsemanship called collection. And that basically means that we realized that when a horse tucks its nose, when it flexes vertically at the atlantoaxial joint between the first and second vertebrae, it balances the horse. And a French trainer by the name of Francois Boucher developed this. And my understanding is he had a horse and he put a scale under the front legs and a scale under the back legs, under the forehand and under the hindquarters. And when he flexed the horse's head vertically, it engaged the hindquarters. There's an interplay of muscles that happens along the horse's back which engages the hindquarters, like stretching your lumbar. This is what I'm talking about. The horse that has its nose tucked, when it engages its hindquarters, it frees up the shoulders. Normally, a horse standing still carries like 2/3 of its weight on its front end. When you flex the horse vertically and engage the hindquarters assume some of the weight, thereby freeing up the shoulders. This is a universal principle in horsemanship today. We know that this helps horses perform, that it leads to longer soundness, that it's better for the horse. These are polo horses. A lot of people compare these dead goat games to polo. It's a weak comparison to me. Look at all of the gear that these horses are wearing here. These are called standing martingales, and it prevents the horse from raising his head. It's a physical constraint on the horse that aims toward that physiology that I'm talking about. This is Kokboru. These horses could not wear that kind of gear. The way these horses are intermingled here, what they call a scrum, to restrict the horse in that way would be detrimental to its performance. So these guys right here have come together to fight over the goat. And you have to reach down and pick it up when you're in this scrum. These are Americans. I took this photo of the American team this year in Kazakhstan. This is another example of the game. This horse is ramming this horse. This guy is picking up the goat. That's the goat. So you can't ram another horse if his head is tucked. In ancient warfare, they couldn't have the horse's nose tucked because they needed the shoulders of the horse, the breastplate of the horse, to actually enact the horsepower over their opponent. So it's ancient in a lot of ways. That it's a form of horsemanship that can be unsettling. And I'll just tell you, when you play this game, it's terrifying a little bit. And I've played it several times. And I remember in 2022 when we went for a New Year's tournament called the Muslim Holidays Nowruz in March. And we practice before you play to get a feel for this. And I remember the sound of the horses stepping on the goat, and you could just hear the bones breaking in the goat. And for me, it's a little bit terrifying. It's like you're back in Central Asia. You know, this is the real thing. So, one thing that's critical to this game is the saddle and the stirrups. So this game can't be 3,000 years old because you can't play without stirrups. So this guy's leaning down to pick up the goat, and all of his weight is on that leg right there. The left leg that's folded underneath the rider. That leg is what's going to enable him to sit upright in the saddle once he is trying to haul it aboard. This is the same thing. The rider's right leg is supporting the weight of the goat. And these horses are the most stable horses in the world. I mean, this is a light goat. There's no way that goat weighs 80 pounds. At the World Nomad Games, they use heavy goats. They want it to be difficult. They want it particularly to be difficult for the Americans, which it is. But here, all of the rider's weight is on his right leg. There's no way he could do this without stirrups. And I'll say, when they strap the saddles to these horses, they use 2 cinches or girths, and they're like 2-inch wide nylon trucker strap. And you've never seen anybody tighten the cinch on a saddle till you've watched these guys before the game. I watched them pull the cinch strap over their shoulder and stand up. Because if this saddle comes loose, when you have 4 or 5 guys right behind you, if something were to slip, you could get run over, you could die. The injuries are common in this. I will say injuries are more common to people than they are to horses, but it is nonetheless very dangerous. So one question we get, or that I've thought about and that we ask when we're over there is, what kind of horses are these? This is at the World Nomad Games. One answer to what kind of horses these are they're all stallions. At the World Nomad Games this year, there must have been 400 horses in the barn. And every one of them's a stallion. There's not a mare in sight. And if you look at the horse on the far right there, he's wearing a muzzle. This is a better look at the horse. They can't bite each other. It's combat, it's combative, but the horses are not allowed to bite each other, and they do. And one thing about this is that the horses, you can't say they want to play the game. You can't say a horse ever wants to be ridden. What a horse wants is for you to leave it alone so it can graze. It has clean water and plenty of grass. But this game is so intense that I almost don't think you could force a horse to do it if he didn't want to. And what they do is they breed horses in large numbers, have them in herds, and they watch the babies. And whichever young males are rearing up at each other, attacking their mother, attacking each other, they say, that is maybe a horse for Cote Baru. So the horses really want to do it. You can see this horse here is working hard. To run like this for an hour takes a lot of stamina. And this is a US player. This is one of my very good friends. And what he's trying to do there is get his leg around the goat. Because if you throw your leg over the goat, it makes it far more difficult for someone to rip the goat from your hands. Because that's what they do. They ride up next to you, they grab it, they whip their horse and go the other direction to try to jerk it from your grip. But if you can get your leg over the goat, you can get your stirrup leather in front of the pelvis of the goat. There's no skeletal structure in front of the pelvis. And this is in our practice in 2022. And this rider has finally grasped the concept of it. You throw your leg over the goat in front of the pelvis. You can actually hold that. The downward weight on the stirrup leather will actually hold the goat in place. This is a pretty small horse here. You see his tail is tied. A lot of the Chinese art that we've seen earlier showed tails tied. People tie their tails all over. This is a nice horse that is ready to play Kokoru. But really the question of like, what kind of horses are these? You know, where do they come from? What breed are they? The loose answer is they're Central Asian horses. You know, a lot of them come from the Russian Federation, a lot of them come from Kyrgyzstan, a lot of them come from Uzbekistan. The Fergana Valley, the heavenly horses of the Fergana Valley are certainly valued for this. But one of the breeds that they talk about, breed is not always something where you're going to get a lot of feedback in Central Asia, but this is a horse called a Karabair. And this is, in my opinion, a pretty nice looking horse. And this is a member of the Kazakh national team getting ready to play. And he's taping the horse's legs because it reduces the chance of injury to tendons all through the front legs. The Karabair horses, they say, have to be a certain height, has to be a big horse, and they really prefer a bay horse. This is a bay horse, a brown horse with a black mane and tail. And here these guys are getting ready. These are the barns at the World Nomad Games, which was held in Astana, Kazakhstan. And the Kazakh team, the American played the Kazakh team, and they thoroughly whipped up on us. The score of the first game was 18-0, the U.S. lost. So it's difficult. This is the cinch. You can see the stirrups are put up around the saddle there, and the saddle has a handle on the front, so that when you lean down to pick up the goat, you can use that handle as more leverage. This is a picture of me in 2022, and this is a Karabair horse. Very similar. This horse's name is Igalik, which means success, and learning how to use your stirrup leather to hold the goat while at a run. But really impressive horses. You know, they're not Mongolian horses. They're not short. They certainly have the endurance, but they would draw the fancy of any horseman worth his salt, if you ask me. This is another Karabair horse. This is at the World Nomad Games this year. And this horse is sort of sweaty. He's played the game. This is our coach. Our coach is a Kyrgyz guy. He's a young man. He's shorter than I am. He's not very big. But you've never seen a small guy throw around an 80-pound goat till you watch my man Nergazi here do it. It's really a testament to technique and what we think tendon strength. Another form of horses and horsemanship in Central Asia. This is horseback wrestling. And in this is an American on the right there, and in this you try to unseat your opponent. There's lots of different ways to go about that. There's also points, given or taken, depending on how you can unseat your rider or bring him closer to you. This American is a jiu-jitsu trainer who lives in Ventura, California, so he thought this looked like a good idea. I personally have no interest in ever doing this. But, he's a fighter, and he thinks that it's, he loves it so much, he got a tattoo of this. So it's important to him. These are the kind of horses they use for this. This is a big horse here. You can see by the depth of the horse's girth line, right behind his front legs, that this is a substantial horse. This is the definition of horsepower. And this is one of these horseback wrestlers, a fighter who just won the fight, and then you can see an eagle. There's also an eagle in the background, and the eagling is cool, but it's not nearly as exciting. These are the kind of horses they use for horseback wrestling. This is a big horse here. Of course, he's a stallion, and he looks like he can pull your house down if you wanted him to. They're a little different than our draft horses, like a Clydesdale or a Percheron or a Belgian, because they are faster and they're more agile. And this could be very similar to what a lot of war horses looked like in Central Asia. This is another horse. This is a referee for the horseback wrestling. But they are very nice looking horses, I thought. The World Nomad Games is in a lot of ways a parade of horse flesh, and you see a lot of good specimens. They looked healthy to me, they looked well cared for. This horse is wearing bell boots on both legs, on the right side. They do have a concept of horse welfare. They do want to look after these animals. They're worth a lot of money over there. And they do try to protect their legs and their tendons and everything else. This is the US team at the World Nomad Games in September. And I'm not on the team because I hurt my arm in a training accident leading up to it. And I ruptured the tendon in my bicep, meaning that the tendon came unattached from the bone in my forearm, and it popped, and so I became the team manager, which wasn't nearly as fun, and was a little frustrating, but nonetheless, I got to go. And a quick word about the U.S. participation and how the United States has come to play this game. No other country outside of Central Asia has managed to field a team in Cote Baru. And we think it's because it's particularly suited to cowboy horsemanship. That it's fast and furious, that it's a little bit wild, and the cowboys have proven to be at least some sort of fertile ground. We operate under the USA Nomadic Sports Federation, and our participation in the World Nomad Games, in the Nowruz tournaments, in all of these tournaments has been in cooperation with the US Embassy, because they see it as a public affairs effort. And so we get grants to send riders over there and to cover the airfare and the lodging. And it's a pain in the neck, you know, because you have to go through all the paperwork. Probably some people in here have done grant work. We don't enjoy that aspect of it. We enjoy playing the game, but we always operate over there with the support of the embassy, and that's a big deal for us and for the embassy, and it does go a long way for earning the respect of the locals. When they see that we're willing to show up and ride hard, they respect that. And the message to us has been, from the Kyrgyz, or from the Kazakhs, has been, you might get your butts kicked, but we're going to help you play. You know, we'll loan you the horses. We had a squad of Cote Baru horses that were brought from Kyrgyzstan, 2 days in a truck to Astana. And the boots here, the safety gear, consists of heavy leather boots on your legs. You wear a plastic shin guard underneath the boot, and then you wear a felt pad underneath the plastic shin guard. You wear those little funny hats. It's faux fur that's designed to protect your head, but we all know that it doesn't really protect your head if bad things were to happen. And you carry a whip. You can't see, everybody carries a whip. And the whip has 2 leather flanges on either side, and you keep the whip in your mouth at all times as a mouth guard, unless you're whipping it. Unless you're using it to move your horse go forward, make your horse go forward, you keep the whip in your mouth. So there is no safety gear. Effectively, there is no safety gear. And I'll tell you, one of the scariest times I had in this game was in a scrum with all the horses. I reached down to grab the goat in 2018, which was my first engagement. And because the horses are together, my hat got pushed down over my eyes. and I couldn't see, you know, and so the game is terrifying, but it's even more terrifying when you can't see. And I'll just say that it is terrifying, and the first time you play this game, you're just scared to death. You know, everything happens so fast. You're trying to stay on your horse, you're trying not to get run over, and it's usually over before you know it, really. The second time you play the game, you learn to breathe a little bit, you learn to see the horses, but it is a steep learning curve. And the French have tried to field a team twice, because they play a game called handball, where you reach down to pick up a ball off a horse and throw it in the goal. But that ball weighs 3 or 4 pounds. You know, I mean, I got a niece who could pick up 3 or 4 pounds from the back of a horse. 80 pounds is a different story. But and really the hardest part of the game is understanding the kinetics of the horses and how they move and how to score points and mostly how to stay out of trouble. Because really the question is how long before we lose an American cowboy to the dead goat games, you know? My partner Claire works in the emergency room in Santa Fe, at the hospital in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and she told me, she said, I'm surprised instant death is a bigger part of this game. Alas, there's some wear and tear. This is at the World Nomad Games. This is our co-captain, Scott Zimmerman, suffered a laceration above his right eye. And obviously no one comes out of the game for so little a scratch as this. And you really don't even know what's happening. But what they do is they attack you with their horse. And when a rider comes in to hit you, he puts the head and neck of his horse in your lap. And every horse in this game has its mouth wide open. And when the teeth of the horse hits you in the face, can take a little wind out of your sails. I had the bridge of my nose cut by a horse in 2018, and it happens. This is also this year at the World Nomad Games, laceration above the right eye. This is at the 2018 World Nomad Games. My friend Brendan here had his nose crushed by a horse's teeth and cut his head. It's not everybody back home, it's not everybody's favorite game. Your significant other is not generally excited about this game. This is a bicep injury from 2018. This is a ruptured bicep tendon in the captain of our team, Scott. And he was in Kyrgyzstan when this happened, of course. And after it did, they took him to a local healer. And he was upset. He's like, I want to go to a hospital. He's like, I want to go home and get this fixed. When you see bruising like that in your arm, you know that something happened. And it definitely did to Scott there. He rallied, he had his arm fixed and came back to play again. And we've had 3 biceps fried by this game, mine included. We had a guy at the World Nomad Games this year who suffered the same injury. This is my favorite photo from 2018 because in practice, one of our teammates had his front tooth chipped because he didn't have his whip in his mouth. And he was going to keep playing, and I said, well, Nick, does it hurt? And I mean, the explicatives that came out of his mouth, it hurt so bad, he said. So they said, well, we better take him to a dentist. So here he is in the dentist shop wearing these ridiculous booties on his boots. And this guy's been throwing around a dead goat for an hour. The blood comes out of the goat. Fecal matter comes out of the goat. You're putting the whip in your mouth and you have a mouth full of goat hair. There is nothing sanitary about this game. And so I just thought it was funny that Nick here is getting his tooth fixed, and our manager was like, well, he already chipped his tooth, and they fixed it better, so actually it's a win-win. I'm like, it's not a win-win. The guy chipped his tooth, this doesn't feel good. This is our jiu-jitsu trainer, so he did okay. So this is a photo from the past World Nomad Games in Kazakhstan, and the U.S. played Turkey, and we lost by 1 point, but we had it was a really hard-fought match. The guys did so well. In the background is the world's largest mosque, which was built with Turkish money. And I think the Turks were really upset that the Americans did so well. And the Turks had 12 riders, and the Americans only had 7. You're not allowed to play with fewer than 8, but our guy with the popped bicep, just got on a horse to play. And this was frustrating for me to watch this, but the guys did well, and I certainly was proud of them. So that's a brief overview of the Dead Goat Games in South Asia and what they mean to me and my experience playing them. So if anyone has any questions, I'd love to answer them.
All right, I'll fill some Q&A here.
I think you cut yourself off when you were talking about the history and development of the stirrup, and you were saying there's no way it could be older than 3,000 years, because when was this stirrup developed in your understanding?
My understanding is the earliest evidence of a stirrup comes from China in 200 BC. Will, is that about right?
No, that is not correct. But if you want to know the true history of the stirrup,
280.
come back here at about 4 o'clock. The answer would be East Asia broadly, but maybe Mongolia at about 250 to 300 CE, most likely. So
there you go.
Other questions? Sorry, I'm just getting my steps in again.
Are these horses shod or barefoot?
That's a good question, and it's a combination. And prior to the games, both teams line up facing each other, and the referees make an inspection of the horses. And one thing they look at is the shoes, so that they cannot have any cleats on them, because people get stepped on quite often. But it varies. About half and half will be wearing shoes. And some of the shoes are made from rebar, forged at home from rebar. So it varies on whether the horse is barefoot or wearing shoes.
If I may be so bold as to inject a question here. You showed one picture where it looked like the saddle might be maybe pushed up a little bit more forward than usual. Are there changes to the positioning as people are gearing up for this type of a little bit more acrobatics that you were talking about, the cinching, but is there some changing to the positionality as well?
It really, not really. They want this girth to be running straight across the center of gravity of the horse. And they might ride with their saddles a little more farther forward than us, but that saddle basically finds its own home on the horse's back. They'll put it kind of up on the neck and slide it back, and it comes home, and that's where you want it. But really, if this is the horse's center of gravity, that's where you want your center of gravity, which is your hips, as close to that as possible, because that leads to the most stability.
I guess this is just for everybody else. Did you can hear me? Do you plan on, or will you be able to return to it with your injury? Is that sorry?
It's kind of a young man's game, and this is certainly some wear and tear. And my significant other, Claire, and I have conversations about whether this is a good idea. No one's getting any younger. And what is the benefit? Is what she's like, no one in this country has heard of this game. No one thinks it's cool. You guys are over there running around in these little fur hats, throwing a goat. The horses are running wide open. I will tell you that when you play this game and you're running with these horses, and there's 6 of you running full speed, and the sound of the whips and the men grunting, Nothing in the world like it. And it is so cool. It is so cool. I mean, it's a wild, exotic, really enriching experience. And after you've done it, there's this sense that, like, my goodness, I lived through it. We should try it again, you know? And so with my bicep injury, I don't know. And one thing they say about the game is that, like, the young guys aren't as good as the old guys because the young guys don't have the mind. Your brain is your biggest attribute out there. And if you can see the motion of the horses, anticipate their movements, you can be a lot more effective. It's like the young guys that crash in there all together, whipping each other, and it's the old guy who holds his horse back and then goes in once it looks clear. So that argument doesn't do me a lot of good at home, but I try it anyway, you know. And so I don't know if I'm ever going to play it again. I want to, but you know, I can't like tear up my body too bad. You know, we talk about like the evidence of horsemanship, I think, or of riding. How this could do it.
I think I've done one of Dr. Hosek's studies.
Yeah.
Okay.
First of all, how are these horses bitted?
All snap the bits
All snap.
across the board.
Secondly, during the game, are there any rules? And if so, are there any penalties?
There are rules and there are penalties. You can't run your horse for longer than like 20 feet is what they say, like a charging penalty in hockey. You can't just, but they do it anyway. You can't whip your opponent. You can whip his horse, but you can't whip your opponent. You know, there are rules, but they try to let the action progress on its own.
So if you do whip an opponent or charge in, what's the penalty?
You go sit on the sidelines on your horse for 2 minutes and your team's the man down.
The way you described how the game makes you feel sounded a little bit like heroin. Like I kind of, yeah. You seem a little addicted. But I'm curious, what is it? I mean, is it just kind of a freakish thing that all of you have done the same bicep injury, or is it the weight of the goat, or is it something else?
Well, my opinion on why I popped my tendon is because my stirrups were too short. In the American West, we ride with longer stirrups. And I went down to pick up the weight, and it was this arm that was pulling me back up. And this arm was carrying all of the load rather than dispersing the load through my legs. And so I think the question of why we've suffered these bicep injuries is because we don't have the technique. In Kyrgyzstan, they start playing it as kids on donkeys with a little sandbag. And so they learn how to do this. That when you pick up 80 pounds and this horse is leaving, right? This horse is running, you have to use every muscle in your body to get it up to prevent injury. But we always take a trainer, a sports medicine trainer with us. And she was told that it is a common injury, that they tear up some bicep tendons doing it.
Okay, thanks.
I'm just really curious about the other, the thousands of horses all fighting all at once over a single goat. I missed where exactly that happens, and also I was just generally interested in more details.
Yeah, so that game is called Alaman Ulak. And it happens in both Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. And really, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan are the main competitors of this game, the best teams at it. And they play it out on the open steppe. There can be no obstructions. But you do see them like crashing through rivers and like into mud bogs and stuff. I have not seen one of those games because I have not traveled to Central Asia in the colder months. But we know that like 5,000 riders. I mean, who in the United States has seen 5,000 horses together? Much less all mounted. You know, this is a very unique congregation of horsemen, and it's basically a mob of horsemen that surges back and forth over the steppe. And I'll say one other thing is that there's a woman who plays this game. Not too many women. There's one woman who I interviewed her, and she lives in Almaty, Kazakhstan. And she learned to play the game because her family raised cattle, and she would go pick up the calves alive by the back leg on her horse. And her name is Ava, and Ava does compete, and she plays Alaman. And really, Alaman is like every man for himself. You go, but that's not true, because we know brothers that play the game. And the way they do it is like, you ride into the scrum, get to the goat. Your brother picks it up, you grab your brother's bridle, and then you whip your horse, and you drag his horse while he's managing the goat. You drag it, and then you have to drop the goat in a circle in front of the judges. And there's big prizes for this. SUVs, apartments, lots of money, herds of sheep, goats, horses.
Healthcare.
Pardon me?
Healthcare.
So healthcare, they're more concerned with the health of the horses than they are the riders.
I'm sorry, I meant as a prize, that you get all of your medical training.
I don't know. I'll say, though, that it's tough on horses, and it's tough on people, and everybody takes damage. We saw a video of the best guy in Kyrgyzstan. It's a guy named Manas Niyazov. And his horse was running, and when I say running, I mean wide open for the goal. And he was using both hands to try to pull the goat up. And he hit the goal while he was upside down, and it dislocated his shoulder and knocked him out cold. People thought he was dead. I mean, this is the best guy in the game, So the riders take some beating, and the horses take some beating. At the World Nomad Games in Kazakhstan, walking into the barn, you could see little droplets of blood every 6 feet where it's coming off the horse.
Go over here, sir. Oh, go.
Did the goat get in?
Yeah.
No, with that one, no. There's a stoppage of play.
Is there anything that you've learned or gained from these games that you've been able to bring home and translate to training or working with your horses in New Mexico?
That's a good question. There is. I mean, like a whip is a good way to move a horse forward. Generally, with spurs in the Western world, we want the horse to move forward off the spurs, but we also want lateral movements. But the whip, applying pressure to the hindquarters of the horse, really generates locomotion in a way that kicking a horse does not. My favorite thing to do is impress people when I'm on a horse and I'm like, hey, you want to watch me pick up that Coke bottle? And then swing by and pick it up. So it's like, it gives me some cool points. Really, it's like an understanding of horsemanship. Like how we look at dressage horses. I trained horses for reining, which is like a discipline where you run and slide them, and it's very much a dressage-based thing. And this is like such an unrefined exhibition of how we can ride these animals. And this sort of informs, an understanding of how humans and horses can get a job done.
All right.
I just wanted to make a comment about the similarities between this sport and what you see at Tibetan horse racing festivals, because while it is a sport of speed, you have the same acrobatics and picking up katas, not dead bloody goats, but more symbols of Buddhism and the like. So thank you, because this makes me think more about the tack and the riding and so forth with that. But my question also tracks back to horse racing festivals. Given the Soviet history of Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan and the like, do you have any sense of how these these festivals, all the revelry around it, might have been impacted by the Soviet era and how it's come back, or how it persisted during that time, maybe changed, and is there any kind of how it speaks now to the development of these regions, kind of how it might take that trajectory like I tried
Totally.
to show in Tibet? Thank you.
Totally. Like, that's a great question, because in Kazakhstan, like, the nomadic life was outlawed.
Yeah. Yep.
Soviet collectivization basically blew that candle out.
Yep.
And so now there's been a real resurgence, and this is like a form of national identity for the Kazakhs. And I think that like the dispersal of horses back to the countryside and among the pastoral population has really like enriched the Kazakh identity. You know, I had a Kazakh woman tell me that like Kyrgyzstan has had much stronger sense of identity with the hat they wear, with their music, with their horse games. The Kazakhs have struggled with this. And there's, you know, in Kazakhstan, more people speak Russian than Kazakh. And so it's like, what's gonna, in the next 20 years, where will this be? But I think that it is certainly like helping them like find their context within Central Asia and in post-Soviet Central Asia.
All right, I think we can do one more question here. If we've got one in the audience, okay. Dr. Eckler.
That was super fascinating. I just have a question about the sport itself. So does each team, because you said that the number of horses may vary, you have to have at least 8, right? Does that mean each team has the same number of horses on the field at once? Or could you be like outnumbered 12 to 8 and therefore they maybe have an advantage?
Yeah, no. Only 4 horses on the field at a time.
Okay.
And they have horses in waiting, so you substitute on the fly, the way ice hockey does, that you come off. And so, like, there are only 12 players, but there could be 15 horses there because you have grooms, people who help. Like, when you fall off your horse, it runs. It runs away. I scored a goal in 2022 by diving into the Taikazan, and my horse ran back to the barn, like half a mile away. And so then there's like 3 kids, they go running after it, you know? So you want a lot of horse flesh in reserve to play this game, but you can never be outnumbered. So, yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna finish here with a final plug. So if Will's storytelling is interesting to you, definitely worthwhile sticking around, coming back after lunch when we will do a little author engagement venue for Will, for Professor Obundaran, our keynote speaker. You can probably buy my books if you need a doorstop or something later this evening. Just joking. It's, you know, there's good pictures in there. We are going to break for lunch, and when we come back after lunch at 2:30, kind of a surprise edition.